big picture, how bad is our Toronto real estate market now, and how does it compare to history, and what are the different areas of real estate like new pre-constructions, rental market, how are they doing comparing to the resale market? Hi everyone, here. So we have been talking about the resale market data analytics. We have also looked at macroeconomics data, unemployment rate, inflation rate. We saw all of those data, right? So in terms of our real estate market, resale is not the only sector. So let's take a look at how does the different parts of real estate market play all together to give us the bigger picture of what's really going on in the real estate market in the Greater Toronto Area, and what you should do or about the market opportunity or about the risk in the market, what you should be doing. Let's think about it, right? Okay, so let's take a look at the screen. We'll see that this graph is basically talking about up to June. Today we're in the middle of July, right? So as of June, what is the balance between buyers and sellers in the Toronto real estate market? And not even just Toronto, this is like actually the entire Canada, right? Let's take a look at the bigger picture in Canada first. In total, in Canada, the demand balance, which means the ratio between buyers and sellers, is the weakest since 1995, okay? And that's measured based on sales to new listing ratio. So in a given month, how many buyers actually made a transaction versus how many new sellers came to market, and there's a ratio between these two. And you can see that the latest data in 2025 June is 49.3%, and that is down 2.2 points from last year, and is driven by 8% more new listings and 3.5% more sales. So you can see sellers are going up higher and faster than the buyers who's willing to make a transaction. And this is not just in Toronto. Toronto looks worse, right? But this is the entire Canada is not doing so great either. And you can see the last time it was this bad is 1995. Right now we're here. And throughout all these other years, because 1995, remember, we had a big real estate downturn from about 1989 to about 1998 or even 2001. This like 10, 11, 12 years, the market really took a downturn and recovered very slowly, right? Took over 10 years to recover. So 1995 was probably the worst, one of the worst years during that 10 years of down market. And that's the only time the balance between buyers and sellers is as bad as it is today. And this is the entire Canada. Toronto, Vancouver will be worse than the average of Canada, right? We know a lot of cities in Canada are actually doing quite well, like Montreal, for example, right? Calgary, on the east, like Great Moncton, Halifax, those are doing quite well in general, but on average, we're still pretty bad, right? As a country. And that gives you an idea of the entire Canada. Now let's compare the biggest cities like we talked about. Let's compare Vancouver to Toronto, okay? Vancouver to Toronto, how does these two biggest cities compare? And we look at the active listings. Number of active listings is the number of total sellers on the market that are still not sold, okay? And in Vancouver, we have 17.5 thousand. Okay, this is a number. The latest number in Vancouver is as of June, 17,000. Okay, in Toronto, it's 32,000, 31.6. Okay, it's right here. Okay, so we can see that Toronto as a grand total is about twice the active listings as Vancouver. But that's not the important part. The important part is, when was the last time we saw this much active listing in these big cities? In Vancouver, the last time we saw this many active listings was 2013. Okay, so about 12 years ago. 12 years ago, we saw also this many active listings. And during the last 12 years, we know that the Vancouver market has came up a lot, and then it dived because of the foreign buyer tax, and then it fluctuated. But right now, Vancouver market, overall, the pricing is still pretty strong. But it's still slow, right? The price has been like sort of staying flat, but it's still pretty high. And the market right now with the number of active listings is equivalent to 12 years ago. Okay, what about Toronto? Toronto at 31.6 thousand, 32,000 active listings. 12 years ago was here. Okay, you can see 12 years ago about Toronto, it's much less active listings than where we are today. 12 years ago only had about maybe 21,000 active listings right here. Currently, we're worse than 12 years ago, right? So when was the last time we actually had 32,000 active listings? 1995 is when we actually had this many new listings, as many as today. So we can see that Toronto has probably a deeper hole that we need to dig ourselves out of, right? Toronto, comparing to Vancouver, we are doing worse in terms of amount of inventory that needs to be absorbed in the future. There's a lot more, proportionally, there's a lot of sellers who's trying to get rid of their real estate, and this is the highest point in the last 30 years versus Vancouver the last 12 years, okay? Just the benchmark, not saying like it's an absolute measure, but just comparatively, we can see the comparison between the two largest real estate market in Canada and how do they stack up. So if we take a look at the price as a result of these, buyers and sellers ratios, right? So in the greater Toronto area, you know what, let's take a look at the Canada first. This is the entire Canada, okay? Canada real estate price, not just Toronto. We can see that it's dipping. After about 2-3 years of staying flat, it's finally dipping. It's saying that the price of a composite benchmark, which is a typical home, this is not because of some luxury properties sold or not sold, fluctuating the average price. This is the benchmark price. It fell 0.2%. It represents a 3.6% down year over year, right? Which is significant. And the cost of a typical home across Canada has rolled back almost 4 years. Okay, so 4 years before, that's like 2021. Okay, we've rolled back to 2021 pricing, and that's the entire Canada on average. Okay, hitting the lowest level since April 21. The big cities like Toronto probably doing worse, but the entire Canada is not doing so well either. A lot of it probably contributed because of Toronto, but on average, we are down quite a bit. Like historically, we rarely see this level of correction. And people are saying it's worth noting because like how you look at a stock market, sometimes there's a floor, right? There's a floor that's resistance. Like when price come to the floor, it kind of bounce back up. Right now, you can see this little point here. We're breaking through this floor, which means we're entering a different level of market that's actually cannot even support the floor we've been supporting very hard in the past 2-3 years. We've been working very hard to support this price floor, and it's breaking through. So that's another factor that people talk about, right? And in terms of affordability, okay, in the entire Canada, big picture again, how affordable is Canadian real estate right now? So it depends on what you're comparing against, okay? So this point right now is the current affordability index. And right now we're at 55.1. So that means on average, median household in Canada, it's spending 55% of their income to owning a home. And that is lower than last year. As you can see, at the peak, Canadians were spending over like probably 63% of income on real estate. And that's way too high. Okay, you should not spend more than half of your income on your house. Okay, and that's a general rule of thumb. Like go back and check your bank account, see how much are you spending your monthly income on your home. If it's over half, you're at a higher risk category, right? So comparing to the 63% peak, we're down to 55%, which is good. But it's actually comparing to the previous decade or even 2 decades. You can see that ever since the real estate bubble bursted in 1989, 1990, right? Affordability has been good. You see 1995 we're here, 2005 we're here, financial crisis, it broke from here to here, right? But even during the financial crisis, homes were more affordable than today. And even before COVID, we were here and down to here. So we can see that the ramp up of 2021, 2022 because of low interest rate has really caused unaffordable real estate to exist in Canada. You can, probably blame it on the government who is in charge back then, right? Because of that ultra low interest rate environment during COVID, it really propped up the real estate market way too high. As we know, real estate prices are hard to come down, right? It takes a lot of mental exercise for sellers to willing to sell for a cheaper price. Like Before COVID, if you can think about a townhouse that was selling for 700,000, 800,000, you know, that was already not cheap as a townhouse. They used to sell for 200,000, right? So 800 were not cheap. But at the peak, they went up to like 1.2, 1.3 million. So if you ask those sellers to sell at 1 million, they will think you're crazy. They're like, how can I sell my home for 1 million? But remember, before COVID, those homes were only like 800,000, right? So people cannot imagine dropping back to that level of price because there has been so many people bought real estate post-COVID period. So that's why price coming down is very, very slow, because sellers have to work through their mental process to admit defeat, right? So that's why it's helping. The last 2 years, prices come down slowly. It's helping the affordability. But today, affordability being 55%, it's still at the highest point in the past 30 years. The last time it was this unaffordable was 1990, when real estate bubble bursted, and it took 12 years to recover back, okay? So that was some history here. So right now we are still very unaffordable as 1990 before the bubble bursted. So if you look at it that way, there could be still more bubbles to burst from today's point, right? Now the rental market, you can see last year at the peak we were at $2,185, $2,200 average rent, right? Right now we're at $2,125, so about 3% lower than last June, which is the 9th consecutive month that the year-over-year rate has been negative, right? So negative 2.7% year-over-year, but it's the 9th month we've been going down, right? So we can see the rent prices are going down too. But if you look at, say, 5 years ago, before COVID, which is at $1,700 on average, we're still up 23% from before COVID on rent. And that's more than double. On average, that's like 4 or 5% per year of increase, even after this correction. And that's double the inflation rate target, right? So the rent prices has really been going up twice as quick as inflation. And as a landlord, you cannot imagine going back to like $1,700 per month on your rental unit, right? But it's actually only been 5 years since you were that low. Rent has really just gone up quickly. And that's hurting the affordability and inflation for everybody, right? And probably hurting the economy a little bit because people are spending a lot of their income on rent or affording a home, and making Canadian economy suffering. So aside from rent, there's another market which is quite important, which we'll talk about in a future video, because time is running out. I want to keep this video short. So next video, we're going to talk about the actual pre-construction market, and there's a lot of interesting things to share there. So stay tuned, subscribe, until next time. Ciao.